Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to another episode of the Coffee Roaster Warm Sessions podcast. Today we're going to be touching up a little bit on, not a little bit, a lot of actually, on Sergei's just recent return from a lot of competition. Recently just returning from competing in, what is it, qualifiers? Is that what they call it? Or yeah. So Brewers Cup qualifiers, as well as a little earlier on Cup Tasters, which Sergei will be progressing into. What do they call it? I have no idea what these terminologies are.
No, it's all part of U.S. Coffee Champs. I don't know if everyone knows U.S. Coffee Champs is its own entity now. They're not technically tied to the Specialty Coffee Association. So, yeah, basically it's a national competition for different areas in coffee. There's barista, coffee and good spirits, latte art. I always mix it up with Coffee Fest because Coffee Fest and U.S. Coffee Champs are not the same thing. And then there's Brewers Cup competition, Cup Tasters competition as well. Those are all in the same category. But different elements of competition.
Most people should probably be familiar with that. If you don't, go on YouTube, tap in some, there's like James Hoffman's, his routine that he did or something online, and plenty of other people. So it's interesting. It's fun. With that being said, this is just a side note. What do you think it's good or bad that they separated themselves from SCA? SCA is on a little dicey run of all kinds of spicy decision making here.
Yeah, that's a very dicey competition. I would say, broadly speaking, I think one of the sad parts about competition is a lot of people underestimate the amount of money and time and energy that competitors put in to do these competitions. And a lot of the times there's really no reward apart from the fact that you love the craft and you're a competitive person and you want to be the best. So the reward is sometimes as much as you get to claim the fact that you're the U.S. Barista Champion or the U.S. Cup Tasters Champion, and you get to go to Worlds and compete against the rest of the world. So imagine training for the Olympics and never getting a gold medal or getting any money. That's not exactly what I'm saying there, but that's about it. And part of separating from a bigger organization into its own is financial. Like, you need to have sponsors, you need to have people investing money into this, and you need to have some kind of scaling model in order to make this sustainable long term. And if it's not sustainable long term and competitors are just like myself spending thousands of dollars to do this and then come home and now have to figure out what they need to do with their rent, just figuratively and broadly speaking here, but it doesn't make it a sustainable model where you can actually inspire and influence people to continue competing in this way. So that's one thing. It's really, really hard to compete.
Are you saying that it's gonna make this even more challenging? That now they're kind of separate entities?
I can't exclusively say that.
Right,
but I'm saying, speculatively speaking, U.S. Coffee Champs is a new organization. The Specialty Coffee Association has been for years. So U.S. Coffee Champs is not as established, and they're all nonprofits. If anyone wants to, I believe everyone knows that the SCA is not a for-profit business. It's a nonprofit. Everyone gets a salary. Giannis gets a salary. Everyone gets a salary there, but it's not a for-profit business. So,
yeah. Do you think that will be, this move is going to be beneficial long-term for Coffee Champs or not quite?
We'll see.
What do you think?
I don't know.
Come on. Give the people what they want.
I don't know. We'll see.
All right. Okay.
The goal is to, obviously, U.S. Coffee Champs being its entity, is the goal is to make it better. It's not to make it worse, right? So the goal is to grow it. We'll see how it happens.
Yeah. Some batchy to kick off the pod.
Yeah. pretty good. It's not bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's,
It's not hot again. Like, in the cup.
No, I think it's pretty hot. We've had it worse for sure.
This is a blend of varietals. It's a Caturra, Pink Bourbon, and a Geisha.
Ooh, okay.
Little blend. Blendy blend. Varietal blend.
I was going to say, it definitely has some of those, like, juicy...
Yeah.
Those, like, the punchy acidity that's in there.
Mm-hmm.
But, yeah. Solid. I think the brew's not the most optimal for it, but I just don't know what I would fix. But I think you could probably squeeze some more goodies out of here.
I went slightly finer than our previous one, but because we went with a smaller dose, so
yeah, but no complaints. Friends, that is the Las Perlitas Lot 3, I think, or Lot 2, whatever's on there. Coffee from Particle. Las Perlitas seems like it's catching a little bit of traction. I'm seeing it in a few more places and a handful of other roasters.
Who else carries it?
Coffees. Man, I saw it somewhere else, but I also saw it that just now, actually, some Timbre dropped a collab with Dayglow.
Oh, nice. That's cool.
Las Perlitas, which is cool. I think I'm pretty sure I saw it in, like, just scrolling through on Instagram. Some of the other roasters had it, so.
Nice. That's cool.
It's a solid coffee.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, let's just walk this through from almost kind of like start to end. Dive in a little bit about your prep, maybe, and then maybe just divide it into like prep versus actually competing. Firstly, what was it like preparing for this, but especially what was your coffee selection like? I also want to preface this with saying this was Sergei's first time competing at U.S. Coffee Champs, especially for Brewers Cup. So just to give you a little bit more context, but what was your coffee selection prep? Or I guess, what do you choose? Do you choose the coffee first, or where are you starting off with? Or are you writing your routine first and kind of your story? I guess, but you also need a little bit of the coffee as well?
Kind of, because first you have to make sure that you get into a competition.
Right.
So you have to apply, you have to go through all the logistics, and you actually have to commit to doing a competition before you can select your coffee. To be honest, last year when I applied, I was going to use a whole different coffee, but that was the thing. I've applied multiple times to compete, and until this year, I was just not ready. And I can't fully say that this year I was ready. I was just in a better place to actually be like, you know what, no matter what, I'm just going to send it. Because the last 2 years have just been very difficult to make time to compete. And this year I was like, nothing is going to stand in my way. I'm just going to do this. And I have the support to actually execute on that. So it was just, that was the main thing. But I've always wanted to do Brewers Cup before I dive into any other element of competition. One, we always talk about the fact that pouring and making coffee at home is probably a filter coffee rather than you doing espresso, because espresso requires so much more money to buy a machine and a good grinder and all of that. But doing a pour over at home is where we kind of all started, in that place where we're just making a coffee for a loved one. That is the crux of most of our journeys in coffee, including myself, So that element of it is what always has inspired me. Hey, I want to do Brewers Cup because that's where it started for me. But I kind of tweaked it a little bit because earlier this year I did Cup Tasters, which is a whole different competition. You don't select, you show up with a cupping spoon, and you have to make sure you're really good at tasting coffee and very accurate and very quick, which I did qualify into nationals for that one. And I was actually one selection off from being 5th overall, which is a bummer. I was so close. But I qualified, so that's all that matters. With that said, when I came to Brewers, the reason I did that was, again, a friend of mine, Antoine, influenced me and said, dude, like, you do this for a living, like, you do this at Narrative, y'all cup a lot of coffees, y'all basically dial in coffees every morning, like Mirror Cups coffees, you are part of a roasting company, like, you do this for a living. This shouldn't be that difficult, which is kind of true, but also there's no such thing in competition as, oh, it's just not that easy. There's no such thing as just showing up to comp and being like, oh, sick, like, I don't need to practice. Everyone trains. Like, there were times when I was training for cup tasters and basically throwing up after cupping 300 coffees in 2 hours. Like, it's intense. It's a lot. It's just like, it's very intense.
But it's more probably, he's meaning more probably like where your headspace and your confidence is as, like, hey, you're not like a noob. You didn't just walk off the street. Like, you have a good amount of like years of experience. It's not your first time cupping a coffee and tasting.
Yeah, then that is fair. But competition that's the thing, is like, it's a whole different ball game. Competition is a game. Like, we are competing according to someone else's rules. We don't set the rules. We read the rules, we observe the rules. The rules sometimes change, and we play by the rules. And sometimes you have to do things in competition that you wouldn't normally do, whether it's at home or in a cafe. Of course, yeah. Because you have to play by the rules. Yeah. And that's the hardest thing. It is a game. And the question is not, necessarily like, what's the best way to brew a cup of coffee, or what's the best way to do this? The question is, how can you win this game?
Right.
So when it came to me approaching competition, I knew like what my narrative would be. That was the core crux of my narrative, was everything I shared earlier about understanding that some of our first moments and experiences with coffee were at home. And like, home was always not only like a safe space to brew coffee and mess up, because why? No one's looking, right? No one really cares if you can't taste coffee. Also, like, no one is really watching whether you time or mistime a pulse. No one. It's just you and yourself. Maybe you get to discuss this with a loved one. Like, maybe you get to discuss this with a friend or a family member. Like, you have the opportunity, but then if you're discussing this with a friend or a family member or a loved one, they are a safe space. Right. So there's this idea of having that safe space. And then the other side of it is, now with social media and the advancement of technology, we've just seen this increase of home brewing communities, right? So now we're talking about people who have EKs, monoliths, like Webers at home, people who have more gear at home than most of us have in cafes, and people who have more time and money to invest into specialty coffee than most cafes have to, upgrade their gear. So we have this other conversation now that is around quote unquote sustainability, because these home brewers are creating these coffee bars, even creating home cafes now, and they're buying specialty coffee. So therefore, they do play a role in sustainability and this long-term effect on how we roast coffee as roasting companies, or also how, cafes buy coffee. A lot of these home brewers will show up to a cafe and buy a bag of coffee, right? If the cafe sells a bag of coffee, then the farmer gets to sell more green. So there's that trickle-down effect. So home brewing and the growth of home baristas at home, it plays a very crucial role to sustainability and the growth of the coffee industry. Think about the Instagram accounts that we follow. Think about some of our friends who went from home brewers to influencers to reviewers to roasting company owners, and we see that happening. So there's this opportunity that for some, brewing at home has created careers as influencers. For others, it's created an opportunity to geek out on extraction. Like Jonathan Gagne is or was a home brewer, right? Because by nature, he wasn't a coffee professional. He was a home brewer. And now he is basically like defining a lot of elements of how we brew at home. He's geeking out on extraction and writing books about it, you know. But then for many of us, like myself primarily, like brewing coffee at home is just an intimate ritual with a loved one. And we also play a major role in sustainability of coffee, you know. So that was the crux of what I wanted to communicate. And because I fell in love with my favorite coffee in the world is from Mekava Estate, all I knew was like I wanted to compete with the Mekava Estate coffee. And the beauty of that is Narrative has a very, very strong and long partnership with Mekava Estate, with Paul and Kevin. So it was awesome that not only did I already know the coffee because of Narrative and I've experienced it, but now I had into the relationship to now connect with Kevin and to talk to Kevin on the phone and then process and understand like what this coffee is really about, hear the history from Kevin. But the cool thing is like when I got on the phone with him, like he was like, oh, you know, your name is not like, you're not an English American name here. Like, so we just talked about family. He has family from Europe. We dove into like such personal things. Like, I mean, I don't even know how much I should disclose, but we even dove talking about nonviolence and like pacifism. Like we just started chatting. And like, I think the first 30 minutes plus is just us talking about life. And that whole conversation with Kevin really felt again like home. So my whole narrative, this whole idea, this through line of what I wanted to share and experience in Brewers Cup was happening with now Kevin, the coffee producer and the owner of Mekava Estate. So that was a big thing. When it comes to like cupping specifically the coffee, we had a few samples. We chose a coffee that we really, really wanted. And there's a lot of things you can say about Mekava coffees. You've had Mekava coffees, right? They're absolutely amazing. When it comes to clean naturals, I've never had a clean natural that compares to a Mekava coffee. Or when it comes to when it comes to geishas, I've never had a geisha that was as complex as a Mekava geisha. So that is what intrigued me. It was both big in flavor, but big in complexity. And a lot of the times the reason you and I don't like a lot of naturals is because they're kind of boring. They're kind of one-dimensional. But because of how Mekava processes their coffees, they're all, I think majority of them or all the coffees I cupped were carbonic macerated natural processed geishas. And there was another varietal, I don't remember if it was a Sidra or Sudan Rumi, one of those other varietals, but I chose the geisha. So they're processed through carbonic maceration, and the processing is very, very clean. And a lot of this is already well known within the competition circles, but there's an element that really excited me when Kevin was sharing about it, is they take Mosto, which is a leach from a previous fermentation. So they leach a little bit of bacteria and yeast from a previous fermentation, and then take that little bacteria and put it in the tank. So it's a little bit of a passed down fermentation from all of their batches that is going back into the tank. And what it does is it allows and gives more control behind the fermentation process. So now the fermentation is accelerated and it kind of like kickstarted, and you don't have to keep the coffee fermenting for as long. So you can get a lot of the flavor with not long fermentation times. And then because it's in a sealed and controlled stainless steel tank where they get to monitor and control all of the elements, the coffees come back absolutely clean. So that's why like I fell in love with that coffee, and to this day I probably have not had a better coffee in my life than any of the Mekavas, including one of my competition coffees. So it was fairly easy to choose that coffee. Plus, meeting Kevin on the phone and talking to him just fully aligned with what I wanted to talk about. So that was a very long rant. I think that's the whole episode. I mean, there's a lot more to competition, why, you know, what gear I use and why and all that. Yeah.
Okay, so given that the rant about home brewers, the intimacy, what role did that even play in the whole competition? Like, And where I'm going with that is give people just a small little, in a nutshell, glimpse as to, do you present that to the judges, or what's the give us a little rundown just for those who maybe may not be super familiar with how these things go. Give us a little insight into that.
That's what I just shared is the extended version of exactly what I told the judges.
Cool. And why is that, like, what do you need to prepare for the judges? What I mean by that is like your routine. What literally, like, just in a nutshell, explain what routine has anything to do with this. Like, what are you doing? Give people some insight into that. I
mean, again, without like unpacking the score sheet, like we would have to unpack a lot of the score sheet and talk about the score sheet in order to get into the very technical elements. I mean, the goal of Brewers Cup is very simple. Brew, especially for qualifiers, that is, brew 3 cups of coffee individually in under 10 minutes with a presentation and a story around either the coffee or a narrative. That's it. But your narrative also has to hit different elements of why you're brewing, what you're brewing, and how you're brewing.
Gotcha.
So my narrative basically defined what gear I was using to brew. Did I execute and communicate that perfectly? I definitely not. I could have done way better.
Right.
And then on top of that narrative, you have to technically present the coffee and say, like, okay, let's say I used this grinder, this brewer, this water. This is why I did it, because 1, this is what I want to communicate. But 2, this is why it was the best way to brew and create and to brew this cup of coffee. Like, why was this coffee roasted this way? Why was this coffee processed this way? So for every element in your routine, you have to give a reason as to what it does and why it does it for the coffee.
Gotcha.
So it's very, very technical.
That makes sense. And so as you're brewing these 3 cups of coffee, you're actually like explaining all this to a panel of judges. Were there 3 judges or something with score sheets?
There's 5 judges. Yeah.
You mentioned 5. You mentioned 10 minutes, 3 cups of coffee. My mouth goes, okay, that's, if I'm brewing a single cup, that's 3 minutes a brew, which means that's 9 minutes. That leaves you with 1 minute extra, but that's not what you're doing.
No.
So give us a little sneak peek. How'd you create the recipe, and how'd you smash 3 cups plus grinding and preparing them into a 10-minute, sub 10 minute? And I'm assuming you probably didn't use all 10 minutes, correct?
I actually didn't, no. And that was actually a fault.
Oh, okay. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I wasn't docked for it. I just didn't use my time. I could have done more.
Yeah. So give us
on top of that, you have to call anywhere from 20 to 50 flavor calls.
Flavor calls.
Or
That's
not flavor as in taste, but
characteristics.
That's like
of
the coffee.
Aroma.
Yeah.
Taste. What else?
Sweetness, acidity, mouth and mouthfeel and aftertaste.
So you really have to get to know your coffee like really well. So let us know, how'd you build this recipe for it to give you enough time? It also has to be pretty consistent from cup to cup. It also has to be somewhat easy to brew because you're also communicating while you're pouring. Like, there's a lot of things going on. What was your ending recipe? What'd you end up doing?
So the recipe that I came up with was a riff and basically influenced by Josh Modisette, who has previously competed in U.S. Brewers, and he was also one of my coaches. Josh basically created a recipe that allowed you to pulsate in a way that you can brew 3 cups of coffee all at the same time. And that's really what every single person does during Brewers. You have to be brewing 3 cups of coffee. So the question comes down to is what's the best you can do and what brewer you can utilize that you can basically execute on that. So there's what I said earlier is you're not necessarily saying like, how can I get this coffee to taste like, quote unquote, the best possible, right? You're saying, how can I make this coffee taste the best possible within this context?
Right. So that means that just because somebody won, national U.S. Brewers Cup or Worlds, it may not be the best tasting cup that you can get if you're brewing 1 cup at home, that doesn't mean that you just need to flock to their recipe
Maybe.
and assume that it's going to taste good, right?
Yeah, maybe. Like, I honestly thought that my competition coffee tasted probably some of the best I've ever brewed.
Okay,
That's for sure.
So it worked out.
Yeah, so
Cool.
it worked out. But again, that's not like, what I'm saying is like, that's not the point.
The
point is to brew an exceptional cup of coffee that hits all the points within that context. So
Gotcha.
That's the point. For me, like, I tried everything. I tried sea breeze filters. I was sold. I was like, man, I'm going to use fast filters and I'm going to use the Comandante because that's a proven fact. I've done my research, like this and that. None of those worked. So I didn't use the sea breeze filters. I didn't use the Comandante. Then I tried other grinders. I did try the EK. I didn't use the EK because, like, my coffee wasn't tasting good with those grinders. At least not the way I wanted it to taste. So I had to make a different choice. But then again, that choice played off really, really well within, again, my script, this and that, created more drama. And also I created more drama because things happened the week of competition with my grinder. But what I was going to say is, like, that was my thought process also behind selecting gears. I had to make sure, okay, this is the gear that not only do I want to present and talk about because of my storyline, but this is also the gear that my coffee is going to taste the best with.
Gotcha. You used a Gen 1 Ode with Gorilla Gear Burr, is that correct?
Yeah.
Right on.
Stepless with a bellow. Yeah.
Excellent. Cool. Yeah. So you did all this prep. How much, give us just a little sneak peek. I want to get to actually competing a little more, but what was prep like? How much are you, I mean, of course you kind of had tasters, which kind of got in the way and pushed everything behind schedule. What does prep look like?
Yeah. Gosh, what I would like to have prep look like is way more run-throughs and talking about it. The challenge was, again, I did cup tasters. I trained for cup tasters twice a week, and then filled in to write my script in between cup tasters for Brewers. But I also didn't have my coffee till I was at qualifiers for cup tasters is when it was being roasted. And then in between, I helped open up a cafe in Chicago. So I was in Chicago with the cafe owners.
Yeah.
I was there for 4 days while my coffee was just being roasted. So I came back from that and then had, I think it was like a 6 or 7 day turnaround before I was already at qualifiers for Brewers. So I had to come up with that. And not only that, like, I'm also like co-parenting a child. So I have my daughter because I was gone for 2 weeks and had to figure out how to do that. And again, the drama behind the grinder was the fact that I went to clean my grinder and lost my auger key and didn't have my competition grinder for 4 days. So I couldn't do a run through. So a lot of things went weird. Like, I literally had to go and source my serving vessels up to Vancouver, BC, because those are the vessels I wanted to use, and those were the vessels that I could easily find without getting stuff shipped. I didn't have time to get stuff shipped.
Right.
Not only that, I didn't even have 3 carafes to brew coffee in, so I had to go find those. And we got those the day I was flying to Maryland, to Bethesda, to DC. I got my serving of carafes, and then I get to competition, and I didn't have enough scales. So Josh Mata said, again, one of my coaches got me some scales. So this is all prep, right? Like, you don't, like, this is all part of prep. And like, prep is not only being able to execute this, is how do you find the money to buy everything? You have to buy that. No one's giving you that. No one's giving you 3 Acaia scales. No one's giving you 3 Brewers. Like, you have to buy all that. No one's giving you a set. Like, there's a lot of time and money invested, or you have coffee companies that are supporting and sponsoring you. So you have to buy all that. Or you have coffee companies that are willing to support and sponsor you. Like, narrative help a lot. Like, if it wasn't for narrative, I wouldn't be competing, to be honest. So that helped out, and that made it happen. But then again, like, some of the things that I had to do was I had to do run-throughs, and I only did basically one run through the night before I flew out.
Mm-hmm.
I did a run through in Everett. I left Everett, came home at 11 p.m. and started packing to leave on my trip. Woke up, had a 12-hour travel day, went to bed at 2 a.m., woke up at 5 a.m. and did a run through in the house. Then went from there at 8 o'clock. I was already getting ready for the stage.
Wow. That's insane.
Yeah.
Absolute insanity.
So it's wild. But yeah, that's that. Of course, as everyone probably knows, did not qualify for nationals. Landed pretty bad. I missed, to kind of sum everything up, I missed a lot of flavor calls. My coffee scored as high as 8 out of 9 for some judges. And then I missed just a lot of categories of flavor calls. There was quite a bit missed, probably about 50% that I should have missed. And what I learned from that was you need to call flavor calls, or any kind of calls you need to make very specific. So if you're calling something, you need to describe what you're calling.
Mm-hmm.
So next time.
Gotcha. One last thing. You mentioned you have to dial in a coffee.
For compulsory, yeah.
Compulsory. Give us, we need to land the plane here, but give us a little sneak peek into what that looks like.
That's also,
what happens?
That's also like, that was also a hard part. You basically have, I believe it's 37 minutes. You get a coffee, you have 37 minutes to dial in a coffee. A
mystery coffee. You have no idea.
You have no idea. They don't tell you the origin. They don't tell you the processing method, the roast. They just have a Ziploc bag of beans. So dial this in, like sick. And it's a grinder I've never used before. It was a Bentwood.
Bentwood. Okay.
Yeah, that was my first time using a Bentwood. I went over to one of their reps and had him give me a run through. And then Isaiah Sheesh gave me some pointers. He's like, you should probably do this. I was like, sick, dude. Thank you. Basically dial in a coffee and then make sure that you can brew it 3 cups again within 10 minutes.
For the judges?
Yeah.
Okay.
But you don't talk about it. You don't do anything.
Yeah,
Judges are standing on the side watching
tasting.
Competitors.
Nice.
They just take your tray and take it to the back and then taste it. That's it.
Wow. So. Okay. Very interesting.
Yeah.
It's a lot. That's like way more complex than I'm assuming cup tasters, or even my little taste of roasters was like. You just drop it off and you're good to go. You say, a few minutes and
qualifiers for roasters also different. I was hanging out with Jason Calloway, my old boss.
Right, because he was
He was at qualifiers.
He was.
Yeah.
How did he qualify? No,
he didn't. But you have to roast in person.
Oh yeah, that's right. With
their machine.
With their whoever sponsors. Was it Strongholds again?
Stronghold, yeah.
Gosh.
So you have to roast in person. Again, they give you some green beans. You have to roast them.
Wow.
You have a practice session, then you have to do a comp. And for Jason, one of the things he mentioned was that the temperature in the building was like something like 15 or 20 degree difference from day 1 to day 2. So.
Wow.
No one takes that into account when they're talking about comp, but you have to deal with it.
Yeah. That's crazy. I don't know how we'll cross that bridge when we get there then.
Pretty wild.
Yeah, well, wow, folks. Now
Told
you know
we could have made this a 2-part episode.
Everything. I guess so. I was like, okay, what are we gonna say? And I was like, okay, there's actually a lot of moving parts. Probably there was definitely a few places where we could have probably easily double clicked into, but I'm sure this won't be the last time you're competing, and so this will probably come up, hopefully with more exciting news of you moving on, and or maybe we'll do a cup tasters one.
That'll be fun.
So yeah, there it is, folks. Little sneak peek, insider look into U.S. Brewers Cup. Mm-hmm. Would you call that a championship?
U.S. Brewers Cup. Yeah,
U.S. Brewers Cup. Yeah, there it is, folks. Well, thank you so much for listening to another episode of the Coffee Roaster Warm Sessions podcast. Friends, as we always say, remember, reflect what's good.